Hello and welcome back to Enlighten Us Arabic. Now before we get started, don't forget to take the quiz in the comments. Today you are joining us for lesson 20 and we are looking at the verbal sentence الجملة الفعلية. Now if you recall, the last time we looked at sentences, الجمل, we said there were two. There's the nominal and the verbal. الجملة الاسمية, الجملة الفعلية. The difference between them? الجملة الاسمية, as the name suggests, begins with an ism. الجملة الفعلية begins with a فعل or a verb. And today we are looking at جملة الفعلية. Now, what are the components of the verbal sentence? عناصر الجملة الفعلية. Well, we have the verb, الفعل. We have the doer, or what we sometimes call in English the subject, الفاعل. And we have the object, المفعول. Now let's look at these عناصر, let's look at these components, each in turn. So starting with the verb, الفعل. Now it's a bit silly to say a verbal sentence must have a verb, of course it must, but what's important to remember here is that the verb must be at the start of the sentence for the sentence to be a verbal sentence to be a جملة فعلية. A فعل has to come at the beginning. This فعل can be the past, فعل ماضي, can be the present, فعل المضارع, or it could be the command, فعل الأمر. Let's look at our second component. The doer, the subject, الفاعل. Now, every verbal sentence must have a doer, a subject. This subject is an ism, and that ism is in rafa. But it can be explicit, and what we mean by this is that it can be a standalone ism. Ism dahir, dahir means shown, means visible. Or it can be implicit, and what we mean by this is pronouns. So it can be an attached pronoun, ضمير متصل, or it could be what we call a latent pronoun, ضمير مستتر. Let's move on to our third component. We have our object, المفعول. What's important about the مفعول is that the مفعول is optional. Not every جملة فعلية will have one. Where it does, its state will be nasab. And again, it can be an ism dahir, a standalone ism, or it can be an attached pronoun, a damir muttasil. Well, let's have a look at some examples. Let's have a look at each of these components in play. Starting with the first example, أكل الرجل تفاحة. The man ate an apple. أكل. This is our فعل. In this case, we have a فعل ماضي. الرجل. الرجل here is our doer. Now we can identify الرجل as the doer because it is in rafa, and we know that it's in rafa because of this dhamma here. This tells us that it's in rafa and it identifies الرجل as the doer. And tufaha or tufahatan, this is our object, and we know that it's our object because it's in nasab, and we can see that it's in nasab. We can see that it's our maf'ul by the fatha. Why this is important and why I'm pointing this out is because in Arabic, the order is fi'l first, verb first. However, the fa'il and the maf'ul can be reversed. So you can actually say akala tufahatan rajulu, and that would still be the man ate an apple. It wouldn't be the apple ate a man because the order is reversed. So that's just something to bear in mind. Right, let's move on. Example number 2. Akala tufaha. He ate an apple. Again, akala serves as our verb, it serves as our fi'l. This gets a little bit interesting now because our fa'il, our doer, is actually denoted by this fatha here, which tells us that this is he ate. So it gives us the pronoun, it gives us the damir, and we call it damir mustatir because we can't actually see it. There's nothing attached. So that's our doer there. That's how we derive he. And again, tufahatan is our maf'ul. Let's look at another example. أكلت تفاحة. So she ate an apple. أكلت is our fi'l. Our fa'il here is the ta'. And again, the ta' denotes she. And we call this damir muttasil because the ta' is visible, we can see it, it's there, and that's our fa'il, so it's attached to the fi'l. And again, tufahatan remains our maf'ul. Let's have a look at another example. Again, things get a little bit more interested. Akalaha, he ate it. Our fi'l madi, our fi'l remains akala. As we have seen, our fa'il is this fatha, which denotes the he, which gives us the he. So again, it's the pronoun. And now this may look like one word, akalaha, but actually we've got the ha attached here, and that denotes the it. The savvy among you may recognize this as the feminine and may recognize this sentence as he ate her. Because Arabic is a gendered language, we use the singular attached pronouns to denote it. In this case, tufahatan, because that's what we're talking about, him eating, was feminine, so we use ha, the feminine singular pronoun, to denote the apple, to speak about the apple here. And our object here is a damir muttasil. Again, we can see it, we can see the damir is attached. Let's have a look at another example. We've got nama rajulu, the man slept. Nama is our fi'l. Ar-rajulu is our fa'il. And again, we know that it's a fa'il because it's in rafa, and the rafa'ness of this particular word is denoted by the dhamma. What's really interesting in this particular example is that there's actually no maf'ul. It's not needed, so we don't have it. Now, when we talked about the components of the verbal sentence, we said there were three. We said we have the verb, the fi'l, the doer, the fa'il, and sometimes the object, the maf'ul. But what happens when the verb is passive? Take the example, the sentence we've seen before, ukilat al-baqaratu, the cow was eaten. The very point of passive sentences, if you recall, is that we don't know who the doer is. We know what or who has been eaten, but we don't know who has done the eating. So where is our fa'il? Where is our doer? Well, if we have a look at the components that we need, we have our fi'l here. Our fi'l madi mabni lil majhul, the passive past tense verb. You'd be forgiven if you thought, well, al-baqaratu is our fa'il because it has a dhamma, it's in rafa, surely it's our fa'il, although that doesn't make logical sense in the sentence. Rather, what happens in this circumstance, what would have been the maf'ul bih, what would have been the object had it been, for instance, akala rajulu al-baqarata, is promoted. And it deputizes for the fa'il. So we call it na'ib al-fa'il, and that's what the word na'ib means. It's to deputize. It steps up and it becomes in place of the fa'il without actually being the fa'il, and we write it in with the dhamma. So we write it in rafa, even though it's not actually a fa'il. In the absence of a fa'il, the what would have been in the different sentence, in an active sentence, the maf'ul bih becomes na'ib al-fa'il, and that's very important in terms of technology. It's only terminology. It's only deputizing. Now there's another thing to consider, seeing as we're looking at sentences. Let's do a comparison between the two. Let's consider the below sentences. We have أكل الناس, the people ate. الناس أكلوا, the people, they ate. What do we notice? Well, here we have a verbal sentence, أكل الناس. So let's pull out what we need from it. We need our fi'l. So we have our fi'l ماضي, أكل, and its gender is masculine, and its number is singular. We have الناس, so we have our fa'il, we have our doer. Its gender is masculine, its number is plural. Now this is how you write a verbal sentence. You'll match your fi'l and your fa'il in terms of gender, but it will always start with a singular verb, irrespective of whether your fa'il is singular, plural, or a dual. So irrespective of the number, the verb that you'll start with is always singular, but you'll match on gender. Let's go back and have a look at the nominal sentence, الجملة الاسمية. Now the جملة الاسمية we have here, الناس أكلوا, the people, they ate. Now remember, this is a جملة اسمية, so we're looking for different components. We are looking for our مبتدأ, which is here, الناس, and we are looking for our خبر, أكلوا. What you'll notice here, however, is that الناس, again, masculine and plural, أكلوا, masculine and plural. When you have a جملة اسمية, your مبتدأ and your خبر matches on both gender and number. There's a little side note to make, and we mentioned this briefly when we focused specifically on الجمل الاسمية, and we talked about the fact that the خبر is not always an ism. In this particular case, خبر is a جملة فعلية. Now we say أكلوا is a جملة فعلية, not a fi'l, because as we talked about already, we have أكل being ate, but we know it's they ate because of this because of this pronoun. So together it forms they ate. We've got our fi'l, we've got our fa'il, so our fi'l is the act of eating, our fa'il is they, the pronoun, so we say it's complete, it's a jumla fi'liya, and that is serving as our khabar. But we'll go into more detail when we look at more complex sentences. We have reached the end of this lesson. Well done if you've made it this far. Do go and take the quiz in the comments and check your understanding. But for now, let's have our mulakhas. So we've been looking at the verbal sentence. We said that the verbal sentence is composed of three parts: the fi'l, the fa'il, and the maf'ul. Fi'l comes at the beginning, must have a fa'il, and the maf'ul is optional. We talked about the fact that the verbal sentence, where a verbal sentence starts with a passive verb, the maf'ul will step up and deputize, and we call it na'ib al-fa'il, and na'ib literally means deputy. And lastly, we had a comparison of the verbal and nominal sentences, and we talked about how in the verbal, the verb, the fi'l, and its fa'il will match on gender, but not on number. We always start with the singular verb. Nominal sentences, your mubtada and your khabar must match in number and in gender. Thank you for joining us today. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Goodbye.